I'm David McCleaka of Venue Strategies, and this is my partner, Michael McGuckey, and we indeed undertook a study of the multi-purpose event center potential for Massena and the greater marketplace. And our original charge was to take a look at the multi-purpose event center within the context of the immediate market, both on this side of the border and in Canada, that might affect the facility. And in terms of the range of possible uses of such a facility might have. That includes indoor turf, indoor court, possibility for ice-related events, meetings, special gatherings, and the like. In other words, a true multi-purpose facility. The question that was at the core was, is something feasible, and if so, what? And what might it cost? What might it look like? And what options were available to the community to look at such a facility going forward? Eventually, our work expanded to look at other recreational options as well. We noted with great understanding, I think, at the end, the tremendous recreation potential available here in the North Country, recreation and entertainment as it relates to outdoor activities. It's a lot to try to program into a facility, and so other projects started to emerge as possibilities as well. But our first and foremost objective was to determine the feasibility for the multipurpose event center. We came up with 3 different scenarios for how such a facility might be created, and I'll let my partner Mike Bugacki explain what they are.
Thank you, Dave. The 3 scenarios that we identified fall along the continuum with respect to the amount of investment, the amount of activity, and the types of activity that would take place in those facility development projects. As we've indicated to the board, scenario 1 was simply an indoor facility of some type that could conceivably host public shows, flat shows, trade shows on a surface that could be a hard court surface or an indoor turf surface, appropriate for indoor sports and recreation play, and also things like ticketed entertainment, music events, family shows, speaker series, things of that nature. So we had a wide variety of event types that we were originally looking at, and the question was, what type of facility might be best aligned with those types of uses based on a demand analysis that we would conduct for this market. That is to say, within this region, based on population characteristics and a competitive venue analysis, how much activity could we expect by event type? How much revenue would that event activity generate? And from an operating budget standpoint, how would that facility under each of the 3 scenarios pencil out with respect to bottom line financial performance? So the 3 scenarios that we were looking at was simply, in scenario 1, an indoor facility that ended up having a turf surface in our analysis that would allow for a combination of a variety of indoor sports and recreation uses, but also a variety of public and business uses. You could do banquets, you could do meetings, you could do flat shows, trade shows, booth shows, ticketed events, things of that nature. The second scenario was the indoor multi-use event center plus a sheet of ice. The idea being, adding a second sheet of ice to this market would make this market capable of activating extraordinary skating event activity, either skating shows or hockey tournaments, which typically need more than 1 sheet of ice in order to be hosted at any given location. The scenario number 2 specified that we would keep the existing skating facility, Massena Arena, active. There's a lot of loyalty, there's historical value. The interviews that we conducted during the course of this project, which were voluminous, either here or over the phone, indicated that even though activity levels are relatively low at the existing facility and ice rates are relatively low, there's a lot of historical value, there's a lot of support for maintaining the facility, there's a lot of loyalty, and we see value in maintaining that facility in conjunction with combining it from a scheduling standpoint with a new sheet of ice that again would allow for incremental activity, not necessarily from your existing skating programs, but with respect to the ability to create sports tourism through extended weekend events primarily during the indoor skating season, but also during the shoulder seasons. The third scenario included the multi-purpose event center plus the sheet of ice embedded within a potential opportunity for some kind of destination tourist resort development project. What we've determined through our research and from running the numbers in each of the three financial performance models is that scenario one, absent, which does not include new ice, from a financial performance standpoint, could perform in a high capacity mode at a level that's pretty much similar to what you'd see at facilities of this type from Buffalo along the thruway all the way to Albany, which is, you know, at or around financial break-even. The second scenario, which includes the sheet of ice, is about 165% of the development cost of the multi-purpose event center. Ice facilities are relatively expensive on a per square foot basis to build relative to something that's, you know, an indoor, you know, field house event center type facility, which is a fairly simple kind of development project. So you've got about 165% of the cost. In addition to that, the operating cost for running ice is a lot more than it is on an annual basis, on a per square foot basis, than it is if you don't have ice. So you're adding cost to your mortgage and you're adding cost to your operating budget when you include the ice. So that disallows you from fighting hard to achieve financial break-even on the operation of the entire facility in scenario two. But that's what makes scenario three interesting when you embed that scenario two project within a bigger project that conceivably would generate annual tourism foot traffic of a number X or Y or Z. You can then combine the natures of the operation and they can essentially feed off each other. So by having some kind of a destination tourism project that is generating incremental tourist activity within the market on a 12-month basis across an entire calendar year, you're actually driving more users into the sports recreation multi-use event center project, which generates more revenue for the facility, which helps offset the incremental operating costs that you've added by having the sheet of ice, which makes financial performance more palatable. I will tell you that from a supply and demand standpoint, weeks, months, hours of research were conducted, again in conjunction with interviews that we held here over the phone. We also did site visits at all the major facilities across the water in Canada. We also took a look at what we identified as comparable facilities, primarily in New York State, indoor event centers, indoor single sheet and multi-sheet skating rinks that we have specific knowledge of and access to the facility managers, so we can access operating budgets, look at their numbers, and do comparisons of those facilities to the market here so that we can really fine-tune our assumptions that we load into our financial performance model. So there was an awful lot of research that went into the development of these three scenarios and the financial performance estimations that were associated with each of the three.
I think that the overarching concluding point of our analysis regarding the multipurpose event center is that the break-even scenario generates the lowest need for any kind of public support. It allows the facility to operate much in the way a field house would operate without the high cost of operating an ice sheet on an ongoing basis. The second scenario increases, in order to achieve break-even, a higher level of public support. And public can be defined perhaps by money that might be obtained through an REDC grant, some type of application to the state on a competitive basis. The third scenario requires, quite frankly, a larger project be in place that the MEC fits into, as Mike has described. But synergistically, on a combined basis, operates at the highest possible levels. And there's two things to think about in this regard. First is, what does a multi-purpose event center add to a community when someone comes to take a look at what is available? Why should I move here? Why do I want to live here? Well, there are a lot of reasons why people would want to live in Massena. The area is beautiful. There's a lot to offer on a four-season basis. But people also look for something more. They look for modern infrastructure. They look for a place where they can play, where their children can play, where they can recreate. In addition to that, there's a tourism component. The term regional tourism is often overused. It's hard to generate regional tourism capacity unless you have a very robust budget and facility that you can offer. But you're sitting on an international border with hockey fanatics across the way. You know better than we do, perhaps, just how much that means to this community. Nevertheless, ice and winter sports here have a maximum price point. And in order to make ice work, it's without a larger project in place to support it, it's likely going to be necessary that some level of public support be achieved. So at a minimum, we think a field house is definitely viable on a break-even basis, and the existing Massena Arena could continue to provide ice sport-related facility support to the community, to the region. That said, we would also recommend that you take a look at scenarios number 2 and number 3 because they offer greater benefits and have much wider economic impacts.
David, it's safe to say private sector business people don't build things to break even. So for us to expect that somebody would come here, build an indoor turf facility, multi-purpose court turf facility to break even isn't going to happen.
Well, let me qualify that for you a little bit, Joe. The break-even scenario that we envision would be a facility that's owned by a not-for-profit. It would be built with some kind of bond financing that would be attracted to, the finance would be attracted to the financials of the project, pure and simple. Either it would pencil or it wouldn't. We think scenario 1 pencils on a standalone basis, as configured. The break-even analysis that we conducted takes into account a management fee for a third party to be running the facility for the community, but it does not assume a profit beyond what would be necessary to fund a capital reserve. So that's how we've defined operation. We don't see it as a privately built and financed facility in total and on the first level. The first level is basically on a management basis, management fee basis. Scenarios 2 and 3, though, transition to what you just described, which is more privately focused financing and operation.
Well, and something else jumping in, John, but one of the other things in scenario 2, which is indoor turf court and ice arena attached, operating on a standalone basis, also points out the need for us to modernize or update Massena Arena.
Absolutely. Correct.
To make it even more viable as a second sheet in the 2-sheet plan.
Absolutely.
Can you explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, one of the interesting things that occurs when you conduct interviews with the world outside your own community is you have the opportunity to capture some very interesting and enlightened input and feedback. There's a very, very experienced and successful facility operator down in the Ithaca area who I'm very good professional friends with, who when I called him to talk about this project, he said, I love that building. He said it's got great ice, and he said it's like old school. He said it's one of the best old school facilities that in my 30 years of coaching hockey and having a hockey player in my family that I've ever been to. He said New York State or elsewhere. So what that does, it supports the idea that there's loyalty and historical value, and within the hockey community, there's a lot of fondness and this romantic idea about the facility that you currently have. That said, it's not contemporary with respect to seating, spaces, services, things of that nature. Locker rooms, yeah. I mean, you know what's happening in Watertown. They're spending $8 or $9 million or more to upgrade, a facility that they have that, in my opinion, they could use that money to just replace the whole thing. That said, you have some similar issues or challenges with your facility as compared to what Watertown has. When you got a building that's 20 or 30 or 40 years old, it's just not contemporary with respect to the way that design firms currently lay out facilities of this sort. There are different needs now than there used to be, X decades ago. So how do you address that? Well, it takes investment. And it takes somebody coming in and saying, okay, the locker rooms are in the wrong place, or they're too small, not enough bathrooms, you need a referee's room, you've got gender equity issues now, you got girls playing and boys playing, got to deal with bathrooms. Seating, is it in the right place? Can people get in and get out? Does it meet code? How many people can be...
Handicap access, which is a challenge at our arena right now.
Exactly. So you got a lot of that stuff, and once you bring a team in to take a look They say, okay, you know, here's a punch list of stuff that theoretically all this needs addressing, and here are the price points for doing these things. So it's not uncommon for older facilities to get some kind of a contemporization and upgrade at some price point in order to kind of, you know, bring them more or less even with where the state of the art is, you know, these days with respect to ice rink, either single sheet or multi-sheet ice rink design.
You spoke about ice rental.
Yep.
And if we went to scenario 2, is there enough, in your study, did you find where we would be able to increase the ice rental and it would still be full? You know what I mean? You talked about our ice rental being a lot lower than surrounding areas.
We're assuming that the skating programs will be able to absorb an ice rental rate increase over time that will not diminish the participation levels in the program.
You can project the shock to the system in order to support the analysis, in other words.
Right.
There were slow incremental changes in
And that's the way this is done in other markets as well. You know, I did the 2-sheet rink down in Jamestown, New York, and there was like a $5 increase per year over the first 5 or 6 or 7 years.
Okay.
So you try to do it in as painless a fashion as possible, so that these you know, private not-for-profit entities, typically youth hockey and figure skating, can, from a business plan standpoint, you know, prepare their membership and plan with respect to membership drives and fundraising, you know, for incremental increases. And a lot of it's education. You have to talk to the people. There's a value proposition involved. You know, you're getting something that's got more bells and whistles and is more contemporary than what you've been used to, and for that reason, there's a cost that's involved, and you try to find ways, and again, Dave talks about the private not-for-profit. Private not-for-profit versus a private for-profit, obviously, you can take donations, you can write for grant money, and so on and so forth. So there's types of dollars that can flow into the income side of the operating budget that you don't have access to if you're a private for-profit or if you're a municipal operation.
And Joe, to get back to your point about private financing or private not-for-profit, what our original charge was to look at this from the point of view that this would not be a Massena-funded building. That, you know, no tax dollars from Massena would go into building the project on any level, any of the scenarios. And in fact, we've held to that standard. So what we're proposing is the financing would be private not-for-profit on the first level, and the second and third scenarios would be either private not-for-profit or private. Both options would work. Our base was there's no subsidy on an annual basis, that we meet our operating needs, and we do so with sufficient coverage so that there's no look back, if you will, or application to town, you know, crying in your beer because the facility didn't work. We were very conservative with the numbers, and we feel they're sustainable.
I will add, you know, to piggyback on my earlier comment about talking to people who are in the game, you know, in the business in some aspect from outside the area. I shared earlier with the board members some specifics relative to a conversation I had with the gentleman who's the on-site supervisor for Bass when they bring their Bassmaster events to the area. I think it was the Convention Visitors Bureau or maybe the Chamber of Commerce who gave me a name and a phone number, got the guy on the phone. We had a very lengthy conversation. He happens to be from New York State. He lives in Orlando, and he said, we love doing business in your community. The fishing is first rate, as good as they see any place. And he said, we love coming to your community even though you don't have the infrastructure that we typically need in order to run our events well. Marinas, docks, you know, meeting facilities, marshalling areas, hotel rooms, large open outdoor spaces so that we can hold you know, meal and music festivals, which is typically part of their overall weekend program. He said, we come to Waddington and Massena, even though you guys don't have that stuff, because the fishing is so great and we have such a great experience. What he then said was, if there is some kind of a new project that's being proposed that can incorporate the needs of an event such as ours, he said, we will afford you access to our intellectual property. You know, the people who are in our organization who can advise you with respect to investments you can make in infrastructure that will allow us to best run our event in your community. So you've got somebody in Orlando who does this thing coast to coast, who's gushing over the experience that they have here, even though you guys don't have the stuff. He said, we need stuff that the market does not have. And he said, in order to help you plan for and invest in the things that you would need in order for your market to host us better, we'll come in and work with you to tell you what those things are. So, you know, when you hear that kind of stuff, when you're conducting these interviews, that kind of enthusiasm and the offer of you know, hours of intellectual support from people who would like to be here running their programs, that's a pretty strong statement with respect to the type of opportunity that exists within that slice. And again, that slice, that kind of event would be supported by an indoor facility. You know, the two would work hand in hand, and it's one of the things that's lacking within this market that would be useful to them. So those are the kind of encouraging comments and the kind of encouraging input that we like to see, you know, when we're doing the due diligence regarding supply and demand and talking to the program representatives who are currently active in the market or who would like to be active in the market or who would like to be more active in the market. That was one of the good stories.
Basically, what you're telling us, what you have told us, is that use scenarios 2 and 3 what we already have here is a paradise for fishermen and water sports, okay, boating and so on. That these could feed off each other, that one could augment the other, and give people a reason not only to come, but to stay.
Correct.
Right? That Massena becomes a destination rather than a pass-through point. Is that correct?
Correct.
Couldn't say it any better than that.
And I think one of the other things that I took away, and correct me if I'm wrong here, is that your conversation with Bass. The Bassmaster Elite is a great event. It's here for a weekend. But if we as a community, collective community, not just Massena, get our act together, get some creativity at the public level, get some investment and some risk-taking to some degree on the private level, that there is some potential here to expand a weekend event to being seasonal, if not year-round, benefit for our economy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The folks who currently come here like a bass tournament, as you say, Joe, you know, it's X days long and then they're gone. Currently, there's no indoor facility that allows you to be active from a sport recreation standpoint at a high level and from a tourism standpoint at any level during what are called by CBD people, you know, the shoulder seasons and the off season. You know, again, the other markets along the thruway, you know, everybody's very active from Memorial Day through Labor Day and perhaps into October, and then everybody struggles. Okay, what do our restaurants and hotel operators, what do they do when the weather gets bad? And they're essentially sitting on their hands for the most part until the weather breaks, you know, in the spring, and they pray and wait for good weather when you get in and around Memorial Day. If you don't have activity during the indoor season, you know, your hospitality trade and infrastructure is always going to struggle. So one of the things I think that we're talking about is a combination of facilities that generate activity types that will contribute to, as you say, Joe, you know, a 12-month calendar of activity as opposed to a short season where everybody's sprinting from day one, Memorial Day, to Labor Day or a little bit beyond, and then business shuts down.
Leaf time.
Yeah.
I mean, after last night, the last ice fishing shanty just came off the water.
When Waddington hosted the Bass Messenger, when we were invited to go out, my wife and I just went up and sat, just listened to some fishermen. I think one was from Oklahoma, one was from Texas, and so on and so on. And we're just listening to their conversation, and they're saying, this place is a paradise. We never knew a place like this existed. And these are professionals who go from site to site. And several of them stayed after the tournament was over.
Right.
Now, again, if you can capitalize, if you have something to draw, there's something to hold.
And the extension of that story, Al, that we heard, was that some of the folks who came here to fish in the tournament, they stayed,
Yeah.
and they tried to contact real estate agents to see if there was property available, because the fishing was so good, and it's what they love and it's what they do. Their idea was, maybe I could have a seasonal residence here that would allow me more access on a regular basis to this wonderful market and the fishing that takes place here. So that's the extension of that story.
Right.
You know,
I think the point you made, that a lot of the business passes through, it stays long enough to enjoy the resource, and then it moves on. And the key is to get them, as you said, to stay, give them a reason to stay. And you have some very fine hotels, motels here that do a great job, and a very loyal customer base, but that tends to be a static number. It tends to be a non-changing number. You want to increase that base, and to increase the base, you need to give them, as you said, more things to do, more places to enjoy. There has to be an infrastructure. Also, you know, again, tied hand in hand with getting the word out. You know, the whole idea of marketing the North Country, I think, can be thought again about just what this area has to offer. And again, when people come, you want them to find the things that they expect. So it takes all components to be put together into a larger philosophy. But the MEC is a starting point.
I heard other stories, Joe. It might have been the gentleman from the Wounded Warrior Vacations who was talking about a ribbon music fest that's done, I think, over in Cornwall. His understanding is 60,000 people, you know, on a weekend for a ribbon. There's no reason that couldn't be done here. Joe Rich, you know Joe, DPAO, in Watertown. I know Joe very well. I've done, you know, work in the Watertown market. He promotes concerts, and he does very well. He does not lose money for the DPAO, private not-for-profit. It's a way of generating revenue for their annual operating budget. I know he's tried to phase himself out from oversight of that operation, but I think...
Here's what else happens there. My wife and I get tickets to a concert. We leave here at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We go there for dinner. Then we go to the concert. We stop after the concert to gas up the car and to go to an ice cream going for the drive home.
The money's falling out of your pockets the whole way. Right?
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. So that's what I'm talking. And really with this, the thing that I keep rattling around in my empty head is that we need to change the way we think about things around here. Bob's going to do a story on this on the Career Observer website tomorrow. And the same 6 or 8 trolls that are always there are going to go, oh yeah, this big plan, oh, who's going to pay for it? You know what? That's the kind of thinking we don't need. We need some, it's not Bob's fault, it's the troll's fault. We need people to start thinking of how can we retool ourselves? How can we retool our entire economy in a different direction that will lead to something, a reason for us to have a tax base here and a place for people to live and work, raise their family, and ultimately pay their taxes to support entities like the town and village government. But in order to pay your taxes, you gotta have a job. You gotta have some income. And we need to figure out where those jobs are gonna come from. And, you know, I love the whole Tesla effort. Hope Tesla opens tomorrow. I'm not gonna wait for that. We can't wait for Tesla to come, because if Tesla comes, then Tesla will decide when they're gonna leave. It happened with General Motors, it happened with Reynolds, to an extent, come Alcoa, and we hope Alcoa is gonna be back for round 2. But you know, we simply can no longer afford to sit back and say, what's coming next? Where can I work next? Where can I work next for 30 years? Right. People don't work in one place for 30 years much anymore. Doesn't happen. So what is our next phase? What will Massena look like in the latter part of the 21st century? We got to figure that out, and we need to get after it soon.
And our natural resources
Is your
are
key.
greatest strength.
It's yours, no one can take it away from you.
Right.
USA Today put us number 5 as a bass fishing destination in the United States. Number 5 in the entire country.
There you go. I mean, there are markets that would die to have the natural resource assets that you folks have. To your point, Joe, regarding employment and population, again, in the interview process that I conducted, I heard from a lot of the local program providers, folks who run pickup basketball leagues, volleyball, skating programs. They say, we don't have any young people doing this anymore. Our young people, they leave. We don't have young people who used to be participants in these programs. So your young adult basketball leagues have shrunk by 50% or more. The same thing for other sports. The young people who typically play recreational sports in greater numbers than, let's say, middle-aged and seniors, senior adults, they have left the market, so these programs are small now. They're not used, they don't have the need for facilities like as they used to, because the size of their programs have shrunk because the young people have basically left the market. So as you say, having a strategy, retooling your thought process, having a strategy that's enlightened and that takes a large look and an in-depth look at the assets and resources that you have, figure out how to use them to your best advantage from an economic development and population stabilization standpoint can make a real difference. I just wanted to make that point because the research I conducted marries up completely with what your experience is with respect to economic development and eco-demo information here in the market.
Did you ask anything?
We have to retool, we have to recreate, and we have to find a way to keep younger people. We got 4 colleges here.
Right.
There's got to be something to keep. But the other thing is, the people who are here, who stayed throughout, okay, they need hope.
Sure.
They need something that, well, okay, we're going to look at this, we're going to look at this, we're going to look at this, but we need some hope. That this region is going to continue to exist. So you've got 2 that you've got to concern yourself with.
Right.
Joe,
And there are- go ahead,
the
I'm
side
sorry.
of your Tesla program there was that it showed that social media can create a real awareness
No doubt about
of
it.
what's here. And so people got, whether Tesla would ever come here or not, I think the positive takeaway from that is that people became engaged.
Exactly.
And
We had 8,000 people in a matter of a couple days, right?
It created an awareness that we're here. It forced our state and federal representative to at least write a letter
Yeah.
to testimony. Now, again, you would hope that they would do that on our behalf anyways, but it showed that that the social media side of what we may not all be accustomed to does have impact, creates an awareness that can be beneficial.
Well, that connects some interesting thoughts. As we looked at this, we realized this project, it's a standalone, but it's also something incremental, which gets to the idea that if you're going to change the way you think, then you might as well think as big as you possibly can, look at everything. And if you're going to realize and understand that thinking big creates a lot of involvement and a lot of energy, then you're on the right track, because now you've got momentum. And if you've got momentum, then you might as well go for the thing that you think is going to create the widest possible benefits, have the most positive transformation possible. Tesla would be great, I'm sure, if they came, they'd add hundreds of jobs. But that doesn't change the fact that you have a base resource here, which is the core of the area's attractiveness to the wider world. And that resource is there for you to harness. And this project and some others, put together as a whole, could do just that.
And I think you touched on something that I wanted to touch on, I didn't mention, is that whatever we look at, we need to think bigger than we're used to thinking, in my opinion. And to go back to something Mike said, Mike, there are a couple concurrent efforts going right now. There's a meeting tomorrow on the visioning for the BOA brownfield opportunity area, for the old General Motors site, the racer site. And we said we're not going to call it the old GM site, by the way, anymore. We're going to call it the racer site. Because old GM is old GM, they're gone. So that's one of the things we're going to look at tomorrow. The other thing that's forthcoming is this economic development study that NIPA has sponsored with the McKinsey Group. And I'm anxious to see that data when it finally gets assembled in final form. I had an opportunity last week to see some of that in draft form that is still confidential. And one of the things that opened my eyes that I saw is that there are still a lot of young people here. There's still a lot of young families here. There are people having babies here. We don't hear much about it because we think everybody's left. It's just not, the numbers, and they're all based on census data, things like that, don't bear that out. And a guy told me a while ago, you keep talking about seeing being Asian community, look at this data, look at the numbers for the village, it's not true. I didn't really believe him. Then I started seeing these numbers put out by other people, and the numbers are still significant here. But there has been a change in what we do. We park our butts in front of video games. We park our butts in front of the idiot box TV. There's no TV reporters here, so I can say that. And they won't put that in the paper, I'm sure. So, there's been a significant lifestyle change. When I was a kid, I'm a fat little kid, and I went out to play, and I would leave in the morning, and I'd play ball all day. Play hockey all day, 10 below 0, I'm freezing my toes. Time to go in and warm up because I can't feel my feet anymore. So we get to the warm-up shack, get around the kerosene heater, warm up till our toes came back, then we go out and play some more. Kids don't do that anymore, you know? So, those things need to be looked at as we say, what is our goal, where are we headed in 20%?
Yeah, I was thinking about that study when we were talking about carpeting the area and stuff like that. I was thinking about that study that NIPA agreed to do.
Yes, that's good. It's potential to be huge, I think.
Yeah, good.
And they're talking, they should have that